My. Deacon Sylvie Nichols, is this actually where we're at? We're preparing for your retirement. Uh, is it called sitting down in the diaconate?
Yes, it is. It's called sitting down, although I might be standing up again shortly afterwards.
You might be. And well, congratulations on 16 years of ministry with us in the South Ribble, now the Chorley and Leyland Circuit, and particularly putting up with me as a colleague for such a long period of time. You've weathered that storm very well.
But it's been wonderful to work alongside you, Phil, and so many other gifted people in our circuit.
We have a great team, and you've been part of that great team for such a long time. But you've kindly gone through the archives and found some photographs, because we want to acknowledge that you had quite a ministry before you even came to us. So I'll share the screen and we'll go back. But while I'm doing that, tell us, where did it begin for you? Where did ministry start?
Well, I took up my first appointment as a deacon 28 years ago. It wasn't a very auspicious start, because the appointment involved being in pastoral charge of a small church in Stevenage and working alongside the minister at a large 350-member church in a town about 5 miles away, Christchurch in Hitchin. And the funny thing was, the good folk at the small church had been accustomed to a very traditional model of male presbyter as their minister. And I was probably their worst nightmare when I turned up at the interview meeting, being female, a deacon, and also 8 months pregnant at the time. But that did mean they were very, very careful to avoid over-stressful questioning.
And so you've sent us this lovely picture of you and Jim. Well, now here he is, baby Michael.
Yes, Michael was only 5 months old when I took my appointment. That's in the grounds of Christchurch in Hitchin. And I remember at the time, it was lovely to have our photograph taken and to go into a Christian magazine as something of an anomaly at the time because of our circumstances, Jim staying at home. Why is Jim worn a striped tie with a check shirt?
Yes, if you concentrate on it too hard, it's like one of those optical illusion things, isn't it? But you all look really happy. I'm not sure Michael. Michael doesn't look as happy as
I don't
the two
think
of you
Michael
look.
thought. No, I don't think Michael thought much of the proceedings, but Michael has a special affinity with that church because, of course, that's the one he grew up in. And I have to pay tribute to Jim, who was such a wonderful partner in ministry.
How lovely. Of course, for all of us, it was wonderful to get to know Jim too when you arrived. But tell us about your 12 years then in Hertfordshire, in Hitchin.
Well, those were obviously very formative years for me, beginning as a deacon. This is a picture of me taking a baptism with one of the families there. The little girl has actually been adopted and is now being christened, and it's a wonderful story behind that picture. But that church really helped to shape me as a minister. When I was there, it was a URC Methodist church. We went through a couple of interregnums. So it was a very steep learning curve. They supported and encouraged me to take qualifications in counselling. And so I was able to support the listening ministry they had there and train 30 listeners to support people who might just drop in and be in need of a listening ear. And the year after I left, they won a community award as a church for the wonderful things they did for the local community. And they're still going strong in those ministries. So it was a very precious time. And I worked with several wonderful presbyters as well.
Again, this is a lovely, happy picture, isn't it? But the picture tells quite a profound story, as you say, of the family's journey to that point.
For me at the time, it reminds us how God adopts us into his family. We're all adopted children. And that's a wonderful legacy for every Christian.
Now, Hertfordshire to Lancashire is quite a long journey, isn't it? It's quite a distance. How was it for you all as a family when you left Hertfordshire and came up to Lancashire?
I remember for me, it was like stepping into a parallel universe, because I came to a very large town centre church and I'd been used to that environment. So for me, work-wise, it was relatively straightforward. It was quite a different situation for my family. Jim was working as a support assistant in special needs education. He found it quite difficult. I remember at the initial interview, him sitting there and saying, "I don't really want to be there." And that made them realise straight away that Jim would tell it like it was and would be very, very, very honest. And he'd said that in quite a jokey fashion. But that first year was incredibly tough for him and for my son Michael, changing schools. And God had kind of warned me in prayer ahead of that time that things were going to be quite rocky that year. And that kind of held me, that made me think, God knows about this and what we're going through. And by the end of that year, things had completely turned around, and my son was saying, "I like it here, I don't want to leave here."
Well, of course, it is really important to remember the ministerial family as a whole, isn't it? And the impact that ministry has in so many different ways. We're at another baptism here, another christening at Leyland Methodist Church. What are your particular thankfulnesses, your gratitude, your memories of 16 years in South Ribble and Chorley and Leyland circuits?
It's just such a privilege to share with people in so many ways, especially at these very special moments in their lives, these turning point moments like baptisms and weddings, and of course when they're parted from loved ones in funerals too. But I remember when I was working in Hitchin, I was out nearly every night at meetings, and I was conducting a lot of weddings there. And I remember being called into a parents' evening when Michael was about 6 years old, and the teacher pointing out an essay he'd written and saying, "You might want to look at that essay." And in it, he'd written about my parents, and it had got the words, "My mum goes out nearly every night and leaves my dad and I on our own. She marries lots of men." So I had to kind of give an explanation.
Before you were referred to social services. So.
Yeah, that was a narrow escape.
He was telling the truth. This was his your work through his eyes.
Indeed. But we had lots of good times alongside that. And also, of course, there and to this day, one of the features for me has been pastoral visiting, and I'm always amazed by the gracious hospitality of people who welcome you into their own homes, however inconvenient the visit must be at times. And sometimes people would say, "Oh, you're very welcome, but excuse the mess." And I'd look around and think, this is nothing compared to what I've just left at home.
So, yeah, as you say, this is another great picture that shows a family engaging with us in worship. Of course, the time and the seasons of ministry, we have happy times, we have sad and challenging times, don't we? What have you learnt about God and your own faith through all the ups and downs of your time in ministry?
I think simply that God is faithful throughout all the ups and downs, that however tough things get at times, he is always there. His presence is with you. And when we try and be alongside other people, he's simply saying, don't worry about what you have to say. Don't worry about being qualified or anything else. Just give them your presence and I will do the rest. And I've seen that work so wonderfully, especially in groups. I never ceased again to be amazed whenever people get together in groups. If one person is prepared to share something of their journey, then it gives courage to another person. if somebody expresses their doubts and questions, that helps another people, that helps somebody else mention their own struggles. And I just think it's amazing to see God at work in so many ways.
Thank you. Yes, I think of God's faithfulness, and having seen the photograph of Jim at the start of your ministry, of course, I'm also mindful of God's providence that though you were due to leave us, you ended up staying longer, and that enabled us all to show the best love and care that we could to Jim through his illness, and then of course to you, Sylvie, as you had to think about a new chapter of your own life.
Yes, many people were there for me at that time, and simply got alongside me and did all sorts of little things that just kept me going and reassured me that God was there around me. I've worked with many people who have suffered bereavement, and it was just very special for me to have that kind of support, to know it always works two ways. We try and be there for people, but people are also there for us. And whenever I've been visiting somebody, I've always come away thinking, I've learned something from this person as well, and I hope I've been of use to them. That's been my prayer whenever I've gone into a situation. I've simply prayed, Lord, help me to be of some use here. And during that time, people were so kind to me. They dropped off food. They gave me and my son lifts to hospital. And it was just such a joy to be part of a Christian community and to know that I wasn't on my own in that sense.
Well, Sylvie, we will rejoice to pray for you as you prepare to retire. But this is all part of a big new chapter for you. This was last Christmas. What's this occasion? What's happening here?
Well, you will know, Phil, because you were one of the only 6 people present on this day. That a few years ago, I met Robert. Robert shares faith. I'm very blessed that he is also a person of faith. He's actually an Anglican organist, although we won't hold that against him. And he's just a lovely person. So I do feel very blessed to have found love again, especially at my age. And we have a lot in common, and we plan to get married and have a really big church celebration, because I especially wanted my church family and friends to be there. Unfortunately, we all know what happened and what interrupted all of our plans. So many people have had precious plans spoiled, ruined, postponed. But after several times of postponing the big day, we decided we just needed to get on with it. And so we ended up getting married on Christmas Eve. At the time, we hoped to have a meal afterwards, but that got scuppered. So we were basically having a takeaway meal at home on our own. But for that, what it did make me realize is when, as a minister, I've said, you're getting married here in the face of this congregation. This congregation really matters to a couple, being surrounded by all their friends and their church family, if they have one. That's what really makes a day special. And I must admit, I did miss that. And I hope to have that eventually through a church blessing. But it was the beginning, as you say, of a new chapter. And retirement, again, is the beginning of a new chapter. So I'm putting a lot of changes in at once and hoping that they will all be changes for the good.
We have so much to thank God for, Sylvie, for your ministry in Hertfordshire and in Lancashire. And we shall share in some prayers for you, as we will be doing for Tony as well, who of course moves, and we're sharing this online service together. But how particularly would you like us to pray for yourself and Robert as you move into this new chapter of life together?
One of the things I will say that throughout my time in ministry, I've realized that being able to stand back and laugh at myself at times has been a very important asset. I'll just tell you one story. I remember once running into a church member in the street with some very, very noisy roadworks happening in the background, and having this conversation, which I was under the impression she was telling me all about her daughter and her daughter's serious kidney problems. So I was commiserating as best I could. But it was only when she said, you know, Sylvie, if things get much worse, we will just have to put her down, that I realized I must have my wires crossed. And then we found out we were discussing her pet corgi. And I then understood, and anoint them with oil was having such a blank response. There's some words here that I find really helpful at times. It says, these are written by the Abbé de Tourville. Our Lord is with us in all of our troubles and gives us sufficient help to carry us through. So smile and even laugh at yourself when you feel all this inner hubbub going on. For it is a splendid habit to laugh inwardly at yourself. It is the best way of regaining your good humor and of finding God without further anxiety. And I always remember when I was about to be ordained, we'd gone away, deacons, on an ordination retreat. And I remember having a moment of great doubt where I seriously wondered what on earth God was thinking of. But I happened to run into somebody in the corridor there, a very, very wise person. And she just looked at me and she said, I'm going to pray with you now. And she put her hand on my head and she said, Sylvie, the joy of the Lord is your strength. And that somehow hit home and has reverberated ever since, that God has enabled me to never completely lose touch with that joy. And that's held me throughout all these years of ministry, and God has been faithful throughout all of these years. And now I'm hoping, as God always places before you something new, I realize God doesn't actually recognize the word retirement. And as someone once said, there's a test to see if your mission in life is ended. If you're still alive, it isn't.
It isn't.
And I'm hoping now to embark on a new chapter, training as a pastoral supervisor. I've been in that role for a couple of years, trained under the Methodist scheme, but I'm hoping to further develop that because I want to go on getting alongside ministers, both lay people and ordained, who are working under immense stress in their roles today, and I'm hoping to go on supporting them and giving them space to reflect with God on how their ministry is going, what is impacting on them personally. So I'm looking forward to that new challenge that God has set me.
Well, and in that sense, you continue to be a great gift to the church if you're able to offer that gift of pastoral supervision. Are you moving far away?
No, not at all. In fact, we will be settling in Leyland. And that's just how things have worked out for us. And you will know the journey we've taken, Phil, towards that. So I will still be around. I will still be a preacher in this circuit. One of the things that, for me, I'm proudest of is being one of Mr. Wesley's preachers. Because I think we serve a wonderful church in the Methodist Church. I love the diversity we have. We have, as conference said last week, lots of contradictory convictions. We're not always going to agree with each other on these things. And St. Paul said, it's okay. We can disagree on things. We can have different conclusions from our consciences. But what matters is our unity. As Wesley said, if your heart be as my heart, give me your hand. We have to hold that unity because that shows we are the people of God more than anything else. But I just love the freedom within Methodism to hold together lots of different views and to appreciate diversity, and different people have different gifts. We have a wonderful church, and I think God is doing wonderful things with it.
Well, Sylvie, a big round of applause from me. A big thank you to God for your ministry. It will continue, of course, in this new chapter, but this is a season of laying some things down, and we shall enjoy praying for you shortly. You've chosen as one of the songs that we're sharing in this service a hymn that obviously means something to you. So would you like to introduce that hymn for us?
I think this hymn for me sums up everything we've been talking about. In the first verse, me through change and chance he guideth. Goodness, we've needed God's direction through the change and chance of these last 18 months. And I think that is what is our rock, is our strong tower, is our temple, that when all of life gets shaken up, we discover really that God is still there, still present. And, you know, people have really, really suffered these last 18 months. But I think if we can get together, if we can share our stories, we will still discover that God has been working in it. He will be introducing new things. We've all had to cope with change, and none of us like change. But if we hold on to what we know, what we've learned as Christians and this journey, he will show us great things coming up, I'm sure. So this hymn for the moment, and different hymns speak to us at different times, this hymn for the moment speaks to me about what God has in store for us.
All our hope on God is founded.
Yeah.
Sylvie, what a privilege to share in this conversation with you, and to remember the whole scope of ministry and your family and the new opportunities that God is opening up for you. On behalf of the whole circuit and wider district and connection, thank you so much, and God bless you in the new chapter about to begin.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you, everyone.